There are people who put AI to work and people that AI will put out of work. The Boss Mode podcast is for the ones who choose to be the boss.
How have you been, man? What's on your mind?
I've just been head down focusing on humans.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
I'm putting together a course and community for new managers. So the whole week just been like putting together videos and course, like course material and stuff like that.
Okay,
that's been most of the week.
so
but
when you
it
say
is finally done.
Course for new managers, what is the key takeaway for new managers? What's the big win they'll get out of taking your course?
Figure out, arm them with the understanding that if all the great work that you're doing as an IC, when you get promoted up to a manager, if you don't know how to translate those skills, because they're not 100% translatable, because if you're an IC, the work lives in your laptop.
Yeah, and there's an AI angle to what you're describing as well. Let's pull on that thread in just a moment. But tell me more about this distinction between, or this gap between the IC versus the manager.
Well, if you're an IC, the work lives in your laptop, and for the most part is predictable. Once you become a people manager, the work becomes people and unpredictable.
Yep.
For the most part.
When you say the work becomes people, though, here I'm just gonna unclip my dog here and pick her up because she gets too excited when she sees other dogs. All right, I'm back. So when you say people, it I think might be a little bit too restrictive, I wonder, because a manager today is somebody that manages not just other human beings, other human agents, but also AI agents, managing the automations as an agent of my intent as well.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And for the part, the human emotion, human motivation portion of working with AI agents, you don't have to deal with. You'll have to learn how to prompt. And there's a lot of transferability too, right? You have to learn how to provide the right inputs and have the right type of structure to get the outputs that you desire. But in a fair few, it's a lot more deterministic compared to humans because of cultural differences, et cetera, et cetera. You might be muted, by the way. I've lost your audio. There you go. We're back.
Yeah. I wonder, though, if it is that different. I think that AI as well has its own quirks. When we talk about prompt engineering and we talk about context management, I wonder if those are just different ways of describing the way we're working with humans as well. Like, we are trying to figure out what the right thing to say is to make sure they understand. We're trying to figure out how to prepare the correct amount of context for them to do their job. And I think about how much pressure there is on me when I've got a new hire coming in. I said, like, it's one of the most important days, right? Like day one, how do you get them off to a sprint right away so that they get deeply engaged versus just show up on day one and just kind of be like, hey, nice to meet you guys. You shake a few hands, you hang out by the water cooler, some small talk. You don't really know what kind of work you need to be doing. So context loading is really, really important on day one. But I'd argue it's very, very important throughout a human employee's tenure.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. There is a lot of transferability between working with whichever type of AI or harness or whatever else it might be. It's just such a different and challenging beast to wrangle, the people management portion, if you've never had to deal with that before, or had to understand that what works for you, especially if you've got 4, 5, 6 direct reports.
Yep.
And if you just reflect on, I remember when my manager had this talk with me or had this type of management leadership style, so I'm gonna do the same. And then you quickly realize,
I'm gonna have these one-to-ones.
Exactly.
At a certain interval, I'm gonna use the sandwich method to
sure.
say something nice, then something critical, and then say something nice going to make them feel good. So just borrowing those patterns. Okay. Yeah. I actually really deeply believe that those exact same skills that you're describing for people who become managers, that gap is actually something that every single human being needs to start wrapping their heads around if they want to be economically productive, if they want to have agency rather than relinquishing their human agency to the machines. Because today, I mean, we think about what you did with when you became Asian, like full Asian Neo. You put these bots, these LLMs to work, these diffusion models to work in order to generate what was a Hollywood grade production, right? And granted, you have some differentiated experience with the art because you studied cinema art in college, but you were able to really do exactly the same thing that a director would do, just not in the director's chair. You did it from your chair. Same thing, different chair. And the key skill gap that you bridged was the skill of thinking about how to manage and direct the work of others. It just so happened that those others, those agents, happened to be AI.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, man, that's been the week. Just putting course material together and then
Yeah,
planning out, like group calls and stuff like that. And it's an interesting thing. It's no wonder also why a lot of the people in my space are excited about, they get excited about this prospect of like, oh my God, imagine if my entire team is just like it's just made up of robots. It's just made up of AI agents because humans are just so human, and they lament the fact that humans come with falling sick and sometimes feeling down, and they bring stuff from home to work and all those other pieces. So it was fun to go through the course material and even just remind myself of how fascinating humans are and fascinating having to coordinate humans and get them to work together to be able to get
yeah,
the output, to be able to ensure that whatever team that you're putting together, like 2 + 2 is 5.
yeah, yeah. That's exactly. And I here I go repeating, I'm beating the same point over and over again, but it's also very hard, I'd argue, to get AI to orchestrate well, work together synergistically to get 2 + 2, like two agents plus two agents equaling the output of 5 or 10 or 100. Like getting that kind of coordination tax actually flipped to the inverse to create just massive synergies at scale. That's something that I don't think anybody has really solved yet. And that's exactly what I'm working on. But I'll be honest, I haven't solved it yet. It's getting agents to play well together among AI agents, but also between AI agents and human agents is tremendously difficult. I do expect we'll see big change there. And I think we're seeing people kind of apply. Oh, my daughter's on the field now. Excellent. We'll see agents start being applied towards some big problems. And then this kind of shifts maybe if we could shift the conversation towards something that I was discussing with Gary Tan, who's the CEO of Y Combinator. So we were on X this past week discussing the importance of decreasing the cost of living. And what are the specific measures that we need to take in order to bring that cost of living down? I think that specifically he posted a Y Combinator request for startups, I think it is, the RFS. And they've got a bunch of them, like one around the agentic company operating system, which is what I'm working on. Another around, though, the use of technology to reduce the cost of producing food for farming. So farming technologies.
Mm-hmm.
And my comment so I replied to his post, and he ended up reposting that. My comment was that we have, insofar as the expenses of the typical person, I'm not talking about like people in extreme poverty, and I'm not talking about people in extreme wealth, right? But for those of us in the middle, um, the lion's share of our expenses, unless you've got a dog, are housing, food, and transportation, right? So these three buckets are very, very expensive for most people. And I think that it's just necessary that we as a society, the people who are kind of architecting the future, are directing capital and intellectual firepower towards bringing those three costs down. We've seen Elon Musk already invest tremendously effectively in bringing down the cost of transportation because Waymos and Tesla cyber taxis are very, very affordable. But I think that housing remains very difficult because of all the regulatory pressure, all the regulatory swamp muck. But that third bucket of food is one that's, I think, eminently solvable just through the application of very advanced technologies, kind of like what RFK was discussing on the Joe Rogan podcast.
Mm. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's been on my mind lately. How do we bring down the cost of living for all of us in the middle? And those three buckets feel like they're the really big ones.
Do you think we'll see it? Do you think we'll see it happen within our lifetime?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's happening right now. Those three buckets again are housing, number one, transportation, number two, and food, number three, are the three biggest expenses for most households, typically in that order. And bucket number two, transportation, we're amidst that transition right now. And it's spiky, right? It's uneven. In Boston, in the Boston where I am, I think that regulatory friction will prevent us from seeing a rapid decrease in the cost of transportation for most people. Hey, is that music cutting into my voice a lot?
Not at all.
Oh, really? Wow. This is
Yeah.
great. Okay, they're really blaring it. Anyhow, in the Boston area, transportation costs are very, very high. And I don't see it coming down very quickly because of regulatory pressure. Meanwhile, you look at Nevada, you look at even some parts of California, right? And Texas, where you've got Waymos running around, where you've got, in some places, Tesla cyber taxis running around. So somebody who's, and I've long been frustrated with the high cost of transportation. I just don't think that it should be expensive at all. But an Uber that cost me $55 should only cost me $2, $3, $4, $5. And it certainly shouldn't cost me $10, $20 on public transportation, right? So this is the great leveling that's happening in terms of opportunity, because in order to have opportunity, the basic cost inputs for operating as a middle-class individual or an individual with agency shouldn't be so high that a failure in your endeavor has physiological consequences, life and death consequences, or like threat to one's general health consequences, or inability to get to the place where you have the opportunities kind of consequences. I think that we're already seeing, back to your question, how long will it take? Will we see in our lifetime a decrease in costs? Absolutely. We're seeing it right now, just not everywhere. And the not everywhere thing is a matter of politicians holding up progress.
Mm. And what about the food one?
Food? I think food is probably the second easiest or the second hardest from the other direction. Food, it's massive industry, of course, just like transportation and housing. We want to ensure that there's food safety, just like we want to ensure that there's transportation safety, right? But just as self-driving cars have demonstrated that they have fewer accidents per 100,000 miles than human drivers. A regular user of Tesla full self-driving, and I'll say it outright, Tesla full self-driving is a better driver than I am. I would feel safer having FSD drive for me than having myself drive for me. I would feel safer having FSD drive for my family than having me drive for my family. And I certainly would feel safer having FSD drive for my family than having some random Uber driver who's not signaling, who's talking on the phone while he's driving, who's like scratching himself while he's driving. Like, it's just, yeah. You have people doing work that they're not actually intellectually engaged with, emotionally engaged with, and that leads to people not caring. And you don't want somebody who doesn't care to be driving a car. And I would argue, likewise, that you don't want people who don't care harvesting your crops. No, that's my kid at bat. You also don't want people who don't care handling your food in the grocery store. Countless times I've been to the grocery store, and like, you can go to a Whole Foods and a Ball One. You can go to a Whole Foods and you find fruits and vegetables that are spoiled, right? It's regular. This is one of the premium grocery stores, right? Not like Zenith of it all. Was she going to get on base? Oh, she's out at first. So I think it was a double play too. That's too bad. So I think that if we can automate a lot of these things, we can take out the element of human apathy that is decreasing the quality of a lot of this food. And I'm not saying that all humans just don't care, right? There are humans that care a lot about the quality of the food that they're putting on the table. They care a lot about the quality of the food that they're stocking in the grocery store. But that number of humans that cares that much is so small that we're just not in a good place in terms of food quality, food safety quality, even. Now, I think that the quality is also connected to cost, because when you have these ups and downs in quality, like this variability in quality, you end up paying this cost of remediating like problems in the food supply through recalls. And each recall it's catastrophically expensive. So I think that right off the bat, if we can raise the baseline of quality through automation, we can increase the quality of foods that people are consuming, but we'll also eliminate much of the cost around recalls on food. And then separately, RFK on the Joe Rogan podcast a couple of weeks ago, he was talking with Joe about the technologies around preventing crops from being being ruined by pests, right? And by disease. So today, well, for the past number of decades, that technology has been pesticides. They've been spraying crops with all sorts of chemicals. That technology has been around genetically modified strains. Now, I think that, is there a role for pesticides? Sure. Is there a role for genetically modified foods? Probably. I think that on the net, GMO has probably been, and this is all the organic nuts are going to be upset with me for saying this, but on the whole, I'd say that GMO is probably good for human society, right? I think that whenever you're even just selecting for which seed are you going to plant a crop with, you're doing a form of genetic selection, right? So I think that it's always been around in varying degrees. But I don't think that we should restrict ourselves to just those two approaches to dealing with abundance in farming output. I think there's another very, very important lever, and that's automation. And of course, farms have been also investing in automation using these large combines, these trailers, these motorized, you're looking at harvesting happening through mechanical means these days that are automated. But I think that the technologies that RFK was highlighting were especially interesting because we're talking now about targeting a specific plant with computer vision and then firing a laser to address the problem of pests. We're talking about precision hydration. We're talking about precision nutrient supplementation at the individual plant level. And when we do that with people, it's prohibitively expensive. Now, I've talked previously about strawberries in Korea, right? How you had the strawberry whisperer who dreamed about specific stocks of strawberries, strawberry plants in her greenhouse. And thought oh, did I hydrate that particular plant enough? Or does that guy have the right amount of sunshine? All that. That's prohibitively expensive unless you're in Korea where, she just finds a way to make it happen. But it becomes viable at scale when we're talking about using automation technologies for it. So I think that RFK raised a very, very important point around how we can decrease the cost of the cost inputs that go into farming at the level of abundance and at the scale that America needs.
Yeah, it's I sometimes sit back and wonder, when our kids are our age, what that world looks like, and it's so dramatically difficult to imagine.
Well, I wrote an essay on this very topic. It's 12 to 8,000 words. It's in kind of late draft stage. I haven't shared it with anybody yet. I published my first Substack post, and it's an inaugural series. And the second part of the series is what I call the Leveling Thesis, a paper that I wrote on that. And so this essay describes, I guess, the mechanism or the big lever that's been pulled in order to make the future for our children a happy, successful, thriving one. And I think that a lot of folks in tech generally choose to talk about or embrace the idea of, they're techno-optimists, first off, and they embrace the idea that AI and automation technology will give us abundance and people will be happy and safe and all that good stuff, right? I think that version of it's so vague that I think that that version of the leveling thesis is actually dangerous. I think that the leveling, because how important is at this pivotal moment in human history, when intelligence is becoming one, we're able to grow our own intelligence in here, right? At tremendously affordable kind of a cost per unit of intelligence. But we're also at this point where as a species, we're now starting to interface with external intelligence, right? We're not just dealing with external data. We're talking about storing and operating and interfacing with a digital intelligence that's becoming highly and tightly integrated with our own intelligence. So I think that there is no greater imperative than for us to think deeply about how we can navigate this very, very big change, because it has massive implications on society. And it's too simplistic, and I think downright dangerous for us to simply say AI will automate things, it'll make things cheaper, and therefore people won't have to work, and they can simply grow vegetables in their backyard, and they can collect universal basic income checks. I think that version is a dangerous statement. And so I put some substantial writing down on paper for this, and went mad with my rantings and ramblings on my giant 8-foot whiteboard. I'd love to run it by you, Dee, if you've got the patience to go through 8,000 words. You can help me cut it down, maybe. I need an editor on this one.
Amazing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Whenever I hear sweeping statements by the techno-optimists, and the word that catches me up always is when they use, exactly like you said, vague terms like people and us. I go, what subset of people exactly? Are you talking about every breathing, walking, alive version of people? Or do you mean the people in your circle people? Because those are very different people. Because they're talking about like the technology applied at a global level. And then, however, when they talk about the benefits, I go, man, there are certain pockets of society that don't have access to half the stuff that you're talking about.
Yeah. And I think that first of all, the quick answer to the question you just asked, like, who is this for? Is it for everybody, or is it for are these people generally thinking it's just for that for them? I don't think that they're evil in the sense that they're saying it's just going to be for us. It's not that. What it is though is that they're just not thinking broadly enough. I'm not going to accuse them of not thinking, period. I think they're not thinking broadly enough and deeply enough. Okay, now I'm being a little bit, I'm starting to cut a little bit into their position. They are, I think, taking their world that they see, the people that they see around them, and then seeing how automation technologies are very likely going to play out in favor of that class of people who are accustomed to managing the work of others, directing the work of others. And you talked about the course that you're building, which I think is an important course. I would argue isn't only for people who are transitioning from employee to manager of other people, from IC to manager. I think that that's a critical set of skills that absolutely everybody needs to develop. And it's people who do develop the ability to manage the work of others, which is, in other words, manage the work of agents, where agents are agents for my intent. They my intent, my direction, and then they get shit done. And I just am ambivalent to the idea of whether those agents are human agents or AI agents. Like, which agents are available to me, which agents are affordable, like viable for me to use. Irrelevant if I prefer working with a human being, but that human being has a salary requirement of 2 gazillion currency units when I only have 100 currency units. Right? It's irrelevant. I just simply can't. I can't afford it. Like, would it be nice for me to be able to afford 2 gazillion currency units? Sure. But if I can't afford it, then it just doesn't matter. So that prices me out of a lot of the kind of human labor, these human agents. But fortunately today, a guy like me that can't afford the 2 gazillion currency units can certainly afford the amount of money it requires to get the bazillions of tokens. I was looking at my Claude usage just yesterday, because I hit 100% of my quota, my limit again, as I've been prone to do frequently these days. And I'm just like, we're talking about hundreds of millions of tokens. And I'm getting that for something close to free because I've got my Claude Max X subscription. So I think that we're at this place where that those agents of my intent, those agents that follow my direction, are just eminently affordable. And I think that that is a really, really good thing for the human species. When we think about a human being, a creature that is, you know, interfacing with the world, synthesizing what's happening and expressing a new idea and turning it into something tangible, creating art, business, love, child, whatever. It's, I think, a beautiful thing, beautiful place for us. But that being said, it's going to be really, really hard for us to navigate the social change that comes of this abundance theory. And the one really big gap that I think folks aren't thinking about, and Elon Musk, he was in Dubai or somewhere in the Middle East talking with he was being interviewed, and he was asked, like, what do we do when we're collecting these universal basic income checks, when the robots are doing all the work for us? Like, what do we do? Like, where's the meaning in that? And then he started talking, and he kind of trailed off. I don't think he's put his mind towards solving for that problem yet, but he is one of the smartest thinkers who is at minimum acknowledging pulling out the problem of there being a deficit of meaning in a world where people are just collecting universal basic income checks and thinking of growing vegetables. So I think that what you said you're working on at the beginning of this call, at the beginning of this podcast, that's actually the thing that needs to be done: educating people. How can we educate people, both in terms of just like the breadth of knowledge that's required, but also in terms of the mindset that kind of favorably positions them to deal with this responsibility, this self-responsibility of directing one's own, like having one's own intent, working without agencies and just for yourself, thinking about what do I want to work on and why do I want to work on it? Separate from monetary concerns, all of that, like what really truly captivates my interest. It is so hard for most people most people just don't have it. And I think that this is a lack of even the possibility of self-agency. It's not even in the realm of imagination of most human beings. And that needs to be cultivated.
Yeah. I mean, we're still very much shackled by the remnants of Frederick W. Taylor, scientific management, industrial revolution, the powers that be do the thinking and direct you, and you follow the instructions and you get told what to do. So, the remnants of that are very real in a lot of ways. I mean, by and large, our education system is forged from that time also in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So,
I saw a
couldn't
clip
agree more.
of a Netflix movie that is it Netflix or Hulu? I don't know. It was a clip that I saw where one of the main characters, she was talking about bees and complimenting or speaking highly of their work ethic, their ability to cooperate, coordinate, how they don't complain, and they just like how she was. And I think one of the antagonists who was sitting across from her said that also just makes them a lot easier to exploit. Like they unquestioningly just do it, and so we as humans, we exploit them for their honey. And I think, I don't know that I agree with that statement, but I bring that up because I do believe that we as a society have wanted our young people to simply become compliant, to become exploitable. How does, and that's what a lot of college kids are grappling with. Like, how do I make myself maximum attractive for being maximum exploitable? And how do I position myself to be best exploited by the company? And in exchange, so that argument or that approach, that mindset, I guess, was worth holding in a world where the exploitation, yes, I'll still say that back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, it was exploitation of the person's talents and abilities and time and energy. But in exchange for that exploitation, they were given a comfortable middle class existence, which with limited time in the office, with limited time in the factory, it gave a lot of people enough bandwidth, time bandwidth, energy bandwidth to pursue other areas where they could be high agency. But as we've seen, the benefits of the rapidly growing economy accrue mainly to the very, like to a very small number of people in the past decade or so, in the past 2 decades, I'd say. That turned into a raw deal where people weren't, they just didn't get the extra bandwidth that they need in order to pursue high agency activities outside of work. And I'd argue, like, do you really want, like, should you be spending the majority of your waking hours in a low agency setting? I would argue no. Like, and that's why I argue against employment in the first place, even before AI and automation. But the beauty is, we are now in a place where AI and automation, if we change our mindset, puts us in a place to be high agency always.
What do companies and organizations look like where if every individual within that cluster, that collection of people, that team, if everyone is high agency, how does that look?
I think we're talking about, for the most part, very, very small teams, companies with very, very few people who all have ownership. And I mean equity ownership. Because one of the defining characteristics of the post-employment economy is a lot of people will be deriving their income from their equity stakes, and everything that comes with that. I think there is an important other category of a team member within a company. When we talk about a high agency individual inside of a company, it could also be the guy who, yeah, he's technically an employee, but if you look closely, he's not really an employee, is he? When he's making 7 figures, when there's like it's effectively, and he's employed at will. The company can get rid of him at any time. When the understanding, even if it's an unspoken understanding, that that person needs to get like enterprise level impact, needs to achieve that level of impact in order to stick around. You're talking about most executives in this situation. And I'd argue that an executive or a very, very highly paid IC, individual contributor at companies moving forward, is effectively an exclusive vendor, right? Effectively an exclusive partner. The legal mechanism is an employee-employer relationship, but that guy's in business for himself, really. And it just so happens that he opted into a bit of a raw deal where it's an exclusive relationship where he loses a lot of leverage. But at that point, when you're talking about those numbers, that level of impact, that level of raw ability, that level of intelligence, we're talking about people who are making informed decisions about entering into those exclusive arrangements. So I think that, will we still have employees? Yeah, sure. I think that category will effectively be, though, in business for themselves. Now, there's, and I wrote about this in my first Substack post that went up last week or early this week, where you also have these people in factories in India who have head-mounted cameras, right? And they are assembling products, and the cameras are being used to record the techniques they use and then sold to robotics companies, AI companies. It's, and these guys are making what, $100 a month, $200, like whatever that tiny number is. So I think that, one, it's a little demeaning that they have these jobs that are like, they just simply know that they're training the robots that will replace them, right? But I'd extend that to here in North America, or in any like kind of developed kind of market, in Singapore as well, in Australia, in South Korea. You've got people who are driving as Ubers. They're driving Ubers, right? And I think that they simply know. Like, I was once in an Uber, and I guess I was being a bit of an ass. I asked the guy outright. I'm like, "What do you think of these self-driving cars?" And I was in San Francisco at the time. This was just before Waymos went like full on available. And he said, "I haven't really thought about it," because he just really had no idea. So these were people that were effectively training the robots that would replace them. And today, I think Uber is hiring, I think paying their drivers in the network to perform odd tasks that would be effectively AI training them. And I think that all of that works a little demeaning. You could go a little further up the ladder where you've got Meta, which recently just blatantly said, hey, we're going to record all of your keystrokes and the way you use your mouse and all of that in order to train AI. But now you're talking about Meta, where again, you're looking at people who are making kind of healthy six-figure income. They've got stock. They've got like it's and the gap for those people to become very high agency individuals on the open market is probably a lot smaller than for kind of your less educated cohort. So I think for them, it's like does it suck from their perspective? Yeah, because they know they're training the robot that's going to replace them, but they've got options. They're a lot closer to the level of agency that's required to thrive in a post-employment economy.
It's funny that you said that conversation with the Uber driver, and his response was, I just haven't thought about it yet. It genuinely does seem like a reflection on just society at large.
Yeah.
And how, and how for a lot of the conversations that I'm having, it's essentially
Head in the sand.
The same type of conversation. And I don't know whether it's a confluence of things, right? I don't know whether it's a voluntary, conscious head in the sand, whether it's because the rate of change when it comes to AI technology is so hard and fast that it's extremely challenging to keep up, or find an insertion point where you have, just an on-ramp that is easy enough for the mind to wrap their head around, or whether it's because it's a resource and time constraint situation where they go, I have to keep my head down and focused on the thing that is making me money today, even though I hear all of these rumblings and all of this news that the way I make money today might not exist tomorrow, but I'm not seeing it anywhere at large yet. So what do? One, it's so challenging because every time I jump on, I try to wrap my head around this. It's moving so fast that I feel like I'm late on the news already, right? So then that's a challenge for me. So might as well opt back into just focusing on what's going to make me money right now, even though it might not be a high clip when it comes to the money that I'm taking home. But what else can I do? So I think there's a bit of that sensation happening as well.
I three comments there. One, absolutely agreed on the idea that a lot of folks are just simply head down, focusing on what they can focus on in order to put food on the table today. And that's just sheer necessity that I think applies regardless. Like, people needed to find a way to put food on the table, and a lot of folks were struggling to do so. And so they just don't have the bandwidth to consider anything else, even if that something else is existential. And as massive as the socioeconomic impact of AI. So that's one. Two, I also strongly agree that a lot of folks are just overwhelmed by the pace of development, the pace of new features and capabilities in AI rolling out. Like just today, Microsoft rolled out effectively a Harvey AI killer right inside of Microsoft Word, wiping out effectively. I mean, I think that Harvey for a while, I've had some questions about the merits of Harvey AI for a while, because I think they've been resting on the idea of being an LLM wrapper for too long. Microsoft has just decimated Harvey's competitiveness in the market. So I think that things are changing so quickly that people cannot keep up. So strongly agree there as well. I think that there is a lot of noise, and it'd be helpful if folks could kind of abstract away some of the specific rollouts and just understand that, like, the pattern of development in AI and the pattern of development in AI's ability to impact society, that's something that folks should spend the time focusing on. So understanding directionally what's happening, and thinking about directionally, if that continues at some accelerated version of even today's pace, how does it potentially change the world? So those are two things that I think folks should one, simply acknowledge that, yeah, they're busy, but two, given the amount of change, they should, rather than focus on the individual features being rolled out, think about the trajectory and directionally what that means for the world that they're living in. So those are the two things that I think are my takeaways from what you just shared. But the third thing is rethinking fundamentally what is the tooling for self and for our children in order to thrive in this new world. And that's where that first point you made in today's podcast about educating people to be high agency and direct other agents, other humans and other machines to do work. That's something that folks need to figure out.
Yeah.
And folks can't wait for government to figure it out for them. Folks can't wait for schools to figure it out for them. Folks can't wait for the guru to figure out for them. But that doesn't absolve us from, here I am lumping myself in with the gurus. But yeah, I think that you and I both think a lot about this. And so I think that the individual responsibility that folks have to think about how to tool themselves and kind of reconfigure their worldview for the massive change ahead, yeah, it's an individual responsibility. But again, it does not absolve you or I from our responsibility to improve or reconfigure society in a way and reconfigure the available technologies in a way and reconfigure the available knowledge and expertise in a way that makes it possible or at least more possible for more people to become high agency individuals.
How do you spend? What is an average week? You know, you're building an AI native company. What is the average week look like for you in relation to what I was saying before, where I got to focus in on what's happening right now. Meanwhile, I'm working in a landscape where things are in flux and changing all the time. How much time do you spend on this is just grind it out, do the work that needs to get done? And how much time do you spend on let me go out there and get a read on where things are on any given day, whether that is listening to other big brains, reading articles, getting a pulse check of where the technology is and where the technology is going? What does that look like from a percentage split standpoint or like an hour split standpoint per week on a typical week?
So a good week for me is one where I spend nearly all of my working hours on creating. I think that I'm a bit of an outlier, though, in the sense that I've always lived in the future. And a very, very good friend of mine used to say to me, and he would say this half as a compliment, but half as a criticism that I very much needed to hear. He would say, it's very often that the smartest people are too, they're too far into the future. And that has always been for close to 2 decades, his criticism of me that I needed to hear, given how far ahead of the market I was, because it necessarily led to it just naturally led to me working for well over a decade, solving a problem that didn't exist yet. In my previous work at Shaker, I was working on dynamic product ads, video dynamic product ads at a time when we started doing that when Facebook wasn't even allowing video ads, period, full stop, right? So I was just way too ahead. And then we were still doing it when Facebook was allowing video ads, but was not allowing dynamic video ads.
Yeah.
And so, and I think we started when the only digital video ads were YouTube, and the only people that could run the YouTube ads were big companies that were built on account. So I think that because I'm, and here's where things have changed for me. Now the world changes so fast that I'm that far ahead. That means if I was 15 years early previously, now I'm probably 6 months early, 12 months early, right? So that's how things have become compressed. So I'm at this for the first time in my life, I'm at this, I'm in this weird near synchronicity with the world, with the world that we're living in now, because it's so close to I still forecast out ahead. I still imagine what the world will be. It's just that I haven't changed my my temporal horizon. It's just that it's the definition of time itself has changed.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that affords me the ability to, with Ivanka, sure, the target market, in terms of the ICP, that has changed from the day zero founder to the existing business operator. but that was a tweak. That's more of a, it changes which part of the feature stack we focus on first, and it also changes our go-to-market strategy. But really, fundamentally, it's still the same technology we're working on. It's still the same solution we're broadly working on, and we'll still eventually need to serve, thankfully, the day zero founders. It's just the day zero founders are, for the most part, crippled with a lack of agency, and crippled with a lack of capital, and crippled with a lack of the mental tooling that they need in order to thrive from day zero at a success rate that makes working with
Yes.
them viable. Right?
Yes, for sure.
Most businesses fail from day zero, right? And that's something that I think is going to change, because I think that, one, the cost of failure is going to drop, but also, like, a lot of the reasons for failure for businesses are actually kind of silly. If you're running out of money, part of that is that a lot of the things that people are spending money on today, a lot of things in business are just unnecessarily expensive. And if those costs start to drop, then we start to affect that, like, we ran out of money, a reason for failure. It's like maybe waiting for regulatory approval with their bio. Like, these timelines, I think, are going to start getting compressed, because they'll be able to start auditing biotech new developments using automation technologies, turning approval times, like taking approval times from years down to potentially weeks. So now that reason for failure starts to go. So a lot of reasons for failure, I think, are going to start going away. It's just we're not there right now. So my broader point is the response to your question, like, how do I spend my time? I think I'm able to spend all of my time, or nearly all of my time, creating, because I think, fortunately, 12 months ahead.
How do you stay so tapped into the movements within tech?
I
within
try not
AI,
to, really.
within...
Yeah, I try not to spend a lot of time on social media. I think I might spend what is it? I've moved to X as my primary source of news. I think the community notes is a brilliant feature. It is quite possibly the highest level of ensuring integrity and truth. Certainly a higher bar than the traditional news media, which I think has, like, their business model fundamentally is the thing that introduces bias and corruption. And I'm going to call it as corruption, because when an editor, or when somebody's choosing which stories make it to the front page based upon reasons other than the truth or the actual merits of the content, and instead focusing on their own commercial interests, I think that goes against the fundamental thing that the news organizations are promising to deliver. And I don't think you have that problem on X with community notes enabled. And it takes a while to get the algorithm to pick up the right threads for you, but it's there. It works. I think is it perfect? No, it's imperfect, but it works better than I think Apple News, certainly, and all the news apps. So I'll spend probably about 15 to 20 minutes a day on that. Generally, I want to be writing. I want to be co-piloting. I want to be designing agents to be executing against my visions. I want to be managing automations. I want to be managing agents, be they human or otherwise. And then the other thing I'll spend my time on is like this, just talking with you, another human being, right? And just connecting, because it's imperfect, our ability to understand, right? And because our ability to understand is imperfect, it's these conversations that add a layer of intentional difficulty by design, in sharing our ideas.
Yes.
And developing more ideas.
Yeah, that's extremely helpful to know.
How about yourself? How do you spend your time?
It comes in waves. So for the most part, I'm like you, where a good week is me in my focus tunnel doing the work. However, I'll go on these little exploration excursions where I an article or a tweet or something on Hacker News, and I go, I really need to understand that. As an example right now,
yeah.
Andrew Karpathy's whole LLM wiki, I've seen it brought up maybe half a dozen times now between Reddit, Twitter, and YouTube. And I go, I got to stay focused on this thing that I got to push through. But once I'm out of this submarine, I got to jump into the next one where I need to just wrap my head around that and understand how I can actually kind of put that type of architecture together for myself and then spread that out to the team. But the only reason why I bring this up and ask you that question is because a common refrain that have and hear from all the different pals that I have and colleagues is, man, I feel so behind. I went out,
Yeah.
built this thing, and then I'm seeing some other new update, and now the thing that I built is a feature somewhere. Like I'd spent, dozens of hours trying to put this together, and now it's folded into Claude. What the heck, man?
Well, I think that that's actually, unfortunately, what we've been taught has worked for the past couple of decades was understanding what's happening right now and competing there. That's been like in hockey parlance. It's like you're fighting for the puck, right? And then there's the Wayne Gretzky idea of skate to where the puck is going to be, and it's counterintuitive. Like he used to watch a hockey game, have like a pencil or pen on a blank piece of paper, and he just like without lifting the pen, he'd just scribble around wherever the puck is, and afterwards he'd look where the puck wasn't and understand those are the places where those are the high leverage places to stand. So I would actually think that the white space is actually something that we should be focusing on more. And if we do that, what happens is by the time the world catches up, we're already kind of there.
Yeah.
And the point that I'll raise is very early on, I was talking to you about the importance of ontology, knowledge graphs in the use of AI for precision retrieval. And I called that truth. Making sure that AI stops, like, how do you get AI to stop lying to you? How do you mitigate hallucination? Interestingly, for the past, I'd say 3 months, 3 months, folks have largely been talking about the use of knowledge graphs in AI. And I think that you're probably coming on to a lot of that. You're probably using a little bit of it here and there. And I'd point to Tomas is running 8090. He's also a gazillionaire who's on the All In podcast. Great podcast if you're into hearing how the gazillionaire class is viewing work in society from their yachts. But he's a very intelligent individual, and he's running 8090, which is a software factory for large enterprise. Interestingly, one of the techniques that 8090 is using is creating a knowledge graph in order to, when they're building software, so using knowledge graphs in software to ensure that the agentic engineering is happening in a way that doesn't kind of cross wires over itself. Because when you have a knowledge graph, you're able to navigate very efficiently. So I'd only say that in order to have the headroom to keep our heads down for an extended period of 3 to 6 months, we need to think ahead 6 to 12 months, ideally 12 months. And if we do that, and if we're truly committed to, and this comes down to we have to be right enough, but like it's a year of our life. Like, can we have conviction? Can we get to a point of conviction about the world, and then work towards that for a period of 6 to 12 months? I think that's an appropriate level of deep thinking. I would say that a lot of us ideally would be able to engage in.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
And you've got such an incredible view of what's happening in commerce and in technology, and you've got such an incredible view on managing and cultivating talent and building systems. And I think that it's folks like you who have so much to share. Like these worldview 12 months out is one that I would say that if you're a young person, you should absolutely hop onto your Dee's course, because it's got to have at least shades of your worldview that I think is a healthy one that folks can learn a lot from. And I'm sure that whether you're an IC or not, or you're unemployed, you're employed, whatever it is that you are, I think it sounds like, and from what I know of you, I think that it will engender a level of agency that is frankly table stakes for living in the post-employment economy.
Yeah, and that's I'm so glad that we had this conversation today, because I think exactly to your point, it really is table stakes now to have to be on top of the movements in this game. It's especially if you're looking for a conviction play, because it's become increasingly difficult, like you're saying, right? There was a time when predicting where the puck was going to be was a lot easier, because, like you said, back then, if you were ahead of the curve, you were 15 years ahead. But if you're right on the puck, you had staying power for a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the guys and gals at Harvey were that's a conviction play. You're putting capital and human resource and tech and all that into building up this company to then, like accrue wealth. In today's world, it's a feature from one of the incumbents, and it goes poof, all that conviction is gone. So it's becoming the point I'm trying to make here, I guess, is it's becoming increasingly more challenging to go, where should I plant my conviction, and what information am I using to triangulate to back that conviction also?
Well, here's the very, I guess, the adjacent to that or stemming from that is the idea that because we have access to the sum of all published human knowledge more efficiently than ever before, in microseconds, in seconds, we can have expert knowledge catered to what I'm looking for. And so I think that the time we spend on social media, I think, is better spent engaging as a co-pilot and developing and exploring ideas in AI. I think that's something that's a high leverage activity.
Yeah.
Achieving the level of conviction that's required.
Absolutely. Especially for individuals like me, I'm very much an external. I process thought externally. The discourse I go, hey, I'm thinking about this one thing. Is it dumb, or am I like fully stupid for thinking this? Invite someone into that discourse and let's kind of bash this through together. AI, the beautiful thing about AI is that you can never wear it down. So I go, I'm still not convinced, right? Tell me more. I'm still not convinced. Go research more.
Actually, I started to see Claude go through multiple rounds of revisions with me and start telling me, further revisions would be counterproductive, David. But then is it though? Because it depends. Like if you're going through, like if you're running in circles and you're not actually making forward progress, that's one thing. And sometimes it's okay to run in circles. But my response in that particular case was, well, actually, I think you're wrong because I'm looking at it from a different perspective now. And I see these issues, and now let's focus on these issues. And then it's, oh wow, like that's a novel approach that I should have considered.
Right, and the reason why I say it's great is because you do not have to, in the back of your mind, wonder whether that statement was made out of, I'm sick of having this conversation.
Yeah,
I want to go home to my wife and kids. You don't have to worry about that.
Yeah,
Whereas,
you can just engage with it.
Yes,
as you see fit. You don't need to. You're not worried about whether you're going to hurt its feelings, whether it's hurting. Like you shouldn't let it hurt your feelings. Let's just disagree when we disagree.
Right. Absolutely. So, yeah. To back up your point, exactly. It's having these tools at our fingertips really does help to make more informed decisions around where the conviction plays are.
Yeah, absolutely. Dee, as always. I love sitting down together with you for these conversations. Dee and David, Boss Mode Podcast, over and out.
Over and out.
There are people who put AI to work and people that AI will put out of work. The Boss Mode Podcast is for the ones who choose to be the boss.